Hoping to belittle his black Maid at a posh event, a millionaire invites her as a joke. When she arrives dressed elegantly and exuding confidence, she captures the admiration of the guests, turning his intended humiliation into his own embarrassment. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The evening sun cast long shadows across Brad Reynolds' marble-floored dressing room as he adjusted his custom-made Armani tie. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, the city skyline served as a backdrop to his preparations for tonight's charity gala. His reflection showed a man in his mid-40s whose perfectly tailored suit couldn't quite hide the self-satisfied smirk that had become his trademark. "James, you won't believe what I did," Brad called out to his friend, who sat in a leather armchair, nursing a glass of scotch. "I invited my housekeeper to the gala tonight." He paused for effect, straightening his cufflinks. "Can you imagine? Lisa Carter at a high society event? She'll stick out like a sore thumb." James raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as Brad continued. "I told her it was a reward for her years of service. But really, I just want to see her fumble through a conversation with the CEO of Goldman Sachs." His laughter echoed through the room, joined by a few nervous chuckles from his gathered friends. Meanwhile, across town in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Queens, Lisa Carter sat at her sewing machine, making final adjustments to her dress. The space around her was small but organized, with design sketches covering one wall and a rack of carefully crafted garments in the corner. At 32, Lisa had spent the last 5 years working for Brad while pursuing her dream of becoming a fashion designer in her spare time. The dress, taking shape under her skilled hands, was her masterpiece. A midnight blue creation with intricate beadwork that had taken her months to complete. She'd started it long before Brad's unexpected invitation, almost as if some part of her had known she'd need it one day. The design was modern yet timeless, with clean lines that spoke of sophistication rather than flash. "I know what you're doing, Mr. Reynolds," she murmured to herself as she worked on the final details. "You want to parade me around like some circus act." Her hands remained steady as she attached the last crystal bead. "But I didn't spend 10 years studying design in night classes to be anyone's entertainment." The dress, when she finally slipped it on, fit perfectly. Standing before her mirror, Lisa hardly recognized herself. The garment's structure emphasized her natural grace, while the color complemented her dark skin perfectly. She designed it to be noticed, but not to overshadow its wearer. A delicate balance that only years of study and practice could achieve. As Lisa applied the finishing touches to her makeup, her phone buzzed with a text from Brad. "Car will pick you up at 8. Don't be late." The condescension was clear even in those few words. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her dress one final time. The drive to Brad's mansion felt surreal. Lisa watched the familiar streets of New York pass by, each mile taking her closer to a world she usually only glimpsed while serving drinks or cleaning up after parties. The chauffeur, who knew her from her work at the mansion, kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, clearly surprised by her transformation. When she arrived, the mansion was already alive with activity. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, and the sound of classical music drifted through the open doors. Lisa stepped out of the car with practiced grace, her portfolio clutched discreetly in her hand. She'd brought it not out of hope, but out of principle. A reminder to herself of who she was and what she was capable of. The guest's reaction to her entrance was immediate and exactly what Brad had hoped for. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and judgmental whispers began. But what Brad hadn't counted on was the way Lisa carried herself. There was no trace of the woman who usually moved quietly through these rooms with a cleaning cart. Instead, she moved with the confidence of someone who belonged. Brad's face, when he spotted her from across the room, was a study in conflicting emotions. The smug anticipation drained away, replaced by something closer to shock. The dress alone made it clear that this wasn't going to be the evening of entertainment he'd planned. Instead of the awkward, out-of-place servant he'd expected to mock, he found himself staring at a woman who commanded attention simply by existing in the space she'd been given. The orchestra's rendition of Vivaldi filled the grand ballroom as guests mingled, their jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. Lisa stood near the entrance, observing the scene before her with calculated composure. Rather than shrinking from the curious stares, she straightened her shoulders and moved purposefully into the crowd. A group of socialites stood near the champagne fountain, their designer dresses and practiced laughs creating an invisible barrier around them. Lisa approached them directly, picking up a flute of champagne on her way. Before any of them could react, she spoke. "That's a stunning Valentino you're wearing," she said to a blonde woman in red. "Spring collection, isn't it? The way they've modified the neckline from the runway version really enhances the silhouette." The woman's eyebrows shot up in surprise, both at being addressed and at Lisa's accurate observation. "Why? Yes, it is," the woman responded, caught off guard. "How did you?" "I follow fashion religiously," Lisa said, her voice warm but professional. "The craftsmanship in Valentino's recent collections has been extraordinary, especially their attention to structural details." From across the room, Brad watched the exchange with growing irritation. He'd positioned himself strategically to witness Lisa's inevitable social failures, but instead found himself watching her seamlessly integrate into conversation after conversation. His grip tightened around his whiskey glass as he saw the blonde socialite, Jennifer Morrison, wife of a prominent hedge fund manager, actually laugh at something Lisa had said. The conversation expanded as more guests were drawn in by Lisa's natural charm. When asked about her own dress, she spoke with modest confidence about its design and construction. "I believe fashion should enhance the wearer's presence, not overshadow it," she explained, running her hand along the beadwork. "Each element should serve a purpose." "You designed this yourself?" asked a silver-haired man who had joined the group. He was Marcus Chun, a veteran fashion photographer whose work regularly appeared in Vogue. "The structural elements are quite sophisticated." Brad moved closer, attempting to interrupt the conversation. "Lisa, shouldn't you be checking if the caterers need help?" he called out, his voice carrying across the small group. The attempt at humiliation fell flat as Marcus Chun continued speaking as if Brad hadn't interrupted. "The way you've handled the bias cut on the skirt is particularly interesting," Marcus continued. "It creates movement without sacrificing the clean lines." "Where did you study?" "I took night classes at Parsons while working full-time," Lisa replied, ignoring Brad's attempted intervention. "It took longer, but it allowed me to really develop my technical skills while gaining practical experience." The group's dynamic shifted as more people gathered to hear Lisa speak. Her knowledge of fashion history, combined with her practical understanding of construction and design, made for engaging conversation. She shared stories about learning to sew from her grandmother, about studying textile composition between work shifts, about sketching designs during her bus commute. "It's refreshing to meet someone with such genuine passion," remarked an elegant woman who had been quietly observing the discussion. The crowd subtly parted as she stepped forward, and Lisa recognized her immediately. Victoria St. Clair, one of the most influential designers in New York. Brad, still hovering at the edge of the group, felt his plan unraveling. He'd expected Lisa to be overwhelmed, to make social blunders he could laugh about with his friends for months. Instead, she was commanding the attention of some of the most influential people in the room. "Tell me more about your design philosophy," Victoria said, gesturing for Lisa to join her at a nearby seating area. "Your approach to structure and movement intrigues me." As Lisa moved to join Victoria, she passed close to Brad. Their eyes met briefly, and Brad saw something in her expression that unsettled him. Not triumph or mockery, but simple, unshakable confidence. She knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of, and his attempt to humiliate her had only provided her with a platform to shine. The evening was still young, and already the power dynamic had shifted dramatically. Brad watched as Lisa settled into conversation with Victoria St. Clair, their discussion animated and engaged. Around the room, guests who had arrived expecting to witness a social train wreck were instead whispering about the surprising newcomer with the self-made dress and the impressive knowledge of fashion. The orchestra started another piece, but Brad barely heard it. He was too busy watching his carefully planned evening of entertainment transform into something entirely unexpected, a debut of sorts, but not the kind he had intended. Lisa Carter, his housekeeper, was emerging as the star of his own party. Victoria St. Clair's interest in Lisa wasn't merely polite conversation. As they sat in the quieter corner of the ballroom, Victoria leaned forward with genuine professional interest. "Your understanding of fabric behavior and construction techniques is remarkable," she said, her trained eye examining the details of Lisa's dress. "Would you be interested in showing me your portfolio?" Lisa reached for the slim leather case she'd brought with her. "I would be honored," she replied, maintaining her composure despite her racing heart. As she opened the portfolio, displaying sketches, fabric swatches, and photographs of completed pieces, Victoria's expression grew, increasingly engaged. Brad, who had been watching from a distance, chose this moment to intervene. "Victoria, I had no idea you'd want to speak with the help," he said, attempting a jovial tone. "Though I suppose it's good to know what the common folk are wearing these days." The silence that followed was immediate and painful. Victoria looked up at Brad with the kind of dismissive glance usually reserved for examining damaged goods. "Brad, dear," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now quiet space. "Do shut up. The adults are discussing fashion." Several guests poorly disguised their laughter behind champagne flutes. Brad's face reddened as Victoria turned back to Lisa's portfolio, pointing to a particular design. "This evening where collection shows real promise. The way you've integrated sustainable materials without compromising on luxury is exactly what the industry needs right now." "Actually," Brad tried again, "Lisa should really check on the kitchen staff." "Brad," interrupted another guest, a fashion editor from Vogue, "the only person making a scene here is you. Some of us are trying to discover new talent." The gathered crowd had grown, with more guests drawn to the excitement. Lisa remained focused on her discussion with Victoria, explaining her design choices with quiet confidence. "I believe luxury fashion can be both sustainable and accessible," she explained, turning to a page showing a series of adaptable pieces. Each garment is designed to be versatile, reducing the need for extensive wardrobes while maintaining high-end appeal. Victoria Nadi de Provingli. "I'd like you to come to my studio next week," she said, pulling out her business card. "I think there might be an opportunity for collaboration on our upcoming sustainable luxury line." Brad's attempt to maintain control of his own party had completely backfired. Where he'd expected to showcase Lisa's social inadequacy, he instead found himself watching her professional ascension. The guests who normally hung on his every word were now clustered around Lisa and Victoria, eager to be part of what felt like a historic moment in fashion. "I've been following Victoria's work for years," Lisa said to an attentive group. Her approach to combining classic silhouettes with modern sustainability practices has been revolutionary. She spoke with knowledge and passion, her words carrying the weight of someone who had studied her craft thoroughly, not just observed it from afar. Brad made one final attempt to reassert his authority. "This is all very amusing," he said loudly, "but let's not forget where we are. This is my home, and you've inadvertently done something worthwhile for once," interrupted Marcus Chun, the photographer. "Though I suspect that wasn't your intention when you invited Lisa. Was it, Brad?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Several guests who had witnessed Brad's earlier attempts at humiliation exchanged knowing looks. His reputation for casual cruelty was well known in their circles, but rarely had it backfired so spectacularly. Victoria stood, maintaining her commanding presence. "Lisa, I look forward to our meeting next week. I think you'll find the fashion world more welcoming than certain other environments." Her pointed glance at Brad left no doubt about her meaning. The evening had transformed into something entirely unexpected. Instead of witnessing Lisa's social humiliation, the guests had observed the emergence of a promising new talent in fashion. The whispers around the room now focused not on mocking the help, but on Brad's transparent attempt at cruelty and its magnificent backfire. Lisa accepted Victoria's card with grace, tucking it carefully into her portfolio. The confidence she'd shown throughout the evening hadn't wavered, but there was now an additional gleam in her eye. The look of someone who knew their life was about to change dramatically. Brad stood alone at the edge of the crowd, his whiskey glass empty, watching as his carefully maintained social hierarchy crumbled around him. The woman he'd intended to humiliate was now the center of attention, not as an object of ridicule, but as a respected professional being welcomed into the very circles he'd thought were his exclusive domain. Brad retreated to the terrace, seeking refuge from the scene unfolding inside. He found Margaret Whitman there, a longtime family friend who had known Lisa since she first started working at the mansion. Margaret stood looking out over the garden, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression thoughtful. "Care to explain what you were really trying to accomplish tonight, Brad?" Margaret asked without turning around. Her voice carried the weight of decades of observation and the privilege of someone who had known him since childhood. "I don't know what you mean," Brad replied stiffly, but his usual confident facade was cracking. He loosened his tie slightly, feeling uncomfortably warm despite the evening chill. Margaret turned to face him, her expression stern. "You invited Lisa here to humiliate her. Instead, you've managed to humiliate yourself." She took a sip of wine before continuing. "Did you know she spent 3 years helping my daughter with her fashion design homework? Or that she's been taking online business courses to prepare for opening her own boutique someday?" Brad's silence spoke volumes. Inside, the ND of animated discussion drifted through the open doors. Lisa's voice could be heard clearly as she engaged in a passionate discussion about sustainable fashion with a group of industry professionals. "The thing about truly exceptional people, Brad," Margaret continued, "is that they don't need to diminish others to prove their worth. Lisa has been quietly building her skills, helping others, and working toward her dreams while you've been, planning elaborate ways to make yourself feel superior." Inside the ballroom, Lisa had joined a panel discussion that had spontaneously formed among the guests. The topic had shifted to fashion's role in social mobility and environmental responsibility. Her perspective as both a designer and someone who had worked her way up from humble beginnings added a unique depth to the conversation. "Fashion isn't just about luxury," Lisa's voice carried across the room. "It's about self-expression, sustainability, and creating opportunities for people from all backgrounds to participate in the industry. Every garment tells a story, and every designer brings their own experiences to their work." Brad watched through the terrace doors as several prominent fashion editors took notes. Victoria St. Clair had pulled out her phone and was openly scheduling meetings with Lisa for the coming week. The scene was a far cry from the embarrassing spectacle he had anticipated. "You know what's truly ironic?" Margaret asked, interrupting Brad's thoughts. "If you had actually taken the time to know Lisa as a person rather than seeing her as someone to belittle, you might have been remembered as the person who discovered an exciting new talent in fashion. Instead," she gestured to the scene inside, where Brad's regular social circle had completely reorganized itself around Lisa. The discussion inside had evolved into a broader conversation about privilege and responsibility in the fashion industry. Lisa handled the topic with remarkable grace, acknowledging both the challenges and opportunities she'd encountered. "Success shouldn't be limited by where you start," Lisa was saying. "What matters is the dedication to learn, the willingness to work hard, and the courage to seize opportunities when they arise." Her words carried special weight given the evening's events, and several guests nodded in agreement. Brad made a move to return to the party, perhaps to attempt damage control, but Margaret placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Don't," she advised. "You've done enough. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and learn from your mistakes." Inside, a young fashion student had approached Lisa with tears in her eyes, thanking her for being an inspiration. Lisa embraced her warmly, already embodying the role of mentor despite having just stepped into the spotlight herself. The genuine connection between them stood in stark contrast to the artificial social hierarchies Brad had spent years maintaining. "Your father would be disappointed, Brad," Margaret said quietly. "He built his fortune from nothing, just like Lisa is trying to do. He never forgot where he came from." The words hit Brad like a physical blow, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about who he had become. The evening had transformed into something entirely unexpected, not just a social event, but a moment of reckoning. While Lisa's star rose, illuminating possibilities for others like her, Brad found himself facing the hollow nature of his own achievements. His attempt to showcase social superiority had instead revealed its superficiality. Brad's final attempt at reasserting control came during a lull in the evening's conversations. He approached Lisa as she stood surrounded by admirers, his voice carrying an edge of desperate sarcasm. "Isn't it time you returned to the kitchen, Lisa? After all, we both know your real place in this house." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to watch Lisa's response, the tensity unpalpable. Lisa looked at Brad directly, her composure unwavering. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice clear and steady, "my place isn't determined by your assumptions or your wealth. It's determined by my abilities, my character, and my determination to succeed." The silence that followed was broken by slow, deliberate applause from Victoria St. Clair. Others joined in, the applause building into a spontaneous show of support. Brad's attempt at humiliation had backfired spectacularly once again. "A toast," announced Catherine Montgomery, editor-in-chief of Style Quarter magazine, raising her champagne glass. "To Lisa Carter, who reminds us that true elegance comes not from what we wear or how much money we have, but from how we treat others and pursue our dreams." Glasses raised throughout the room. Even the serving staff, who had watched the evening's events unfold with particular interest, smiled openly now. They had witnessed Lisa's journey from colleague to celebrated guest, and her success felt like a shared victory. "Lisa," Victoria called out, moving to stand beside her, "I think it's time we made an announcement. I wasn't planning to do this tonight, but sometimes opportunities present themselves perfectly." She turned to address the crowd. "I'm pleased to announce that Lisa Carter will be joining St. Clair Designs as our new creative director for our sustainable fashion initiative." The announcement sent a wave of excitement through the room. Several fashion journalists immediately pulled out their phones, eager to break the story. Brad, still standing where Lisa had left him, watched as his attempted power play transformed into a career-launching moment for his former housekeeper. Furthermore, Victoria continued, "Lisa's first collection will debut at New York Fashion Week, showcasing her unique vision of accessible luxury and sustainable design." The crowd erupted in enthusiastic approval, with several influential figures already discussing collaboration possibilities. Lisa accepted the announcement with characteristic grace. "Thank you, Victoria. This opportunity means more than I can express. To everyone here who believes in the power of dreams and the importance of lifting others up rather than pushing them down, thank you." Her words carried special weight given the evening's events. Several women in the crowd nodded in understanding, too familiar with their own experiences of being underestimated or dismissed. A small group of young women, interns and assistants who usually remained invisible at such events, gathered near Lisa. One of them spoke up, her voice slightly trembling but determined. "You've shown us that we don't have to accept the limitations others place on us." Brad retreated further into the background as the celebration continued. The party had transformed into something he no longer controlled or understood, a genuine celebration of talent, determination, and the breaking down of social barriers. "To think," Margaret commented to another guest, loud enough for Brad to hear. He wanted to humiliate her, and instead he gave her exactly the platform she needed. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. As the evening progressed, more glasses were raised, not just to Lisa's success, but to the broader significance of her triumph. Each toast celebrated a different aspect of the evening's transformation, to breaking barriers, to recognizing talent wherever it appears, to the power of dignity over derision. The event had become a testament to the strength of character over social status, of genuine talent over inherited privilege. Lisa stood at the center of it all, her self-designed dress now a symbol of everything she represented: elegance, determination, and the courage to step into spaces others tried to deny her. Brad's remaining friends had drifted away from him, drawn instead to the authentic warmth and inspiration radiating from Lisa's gathering. His carefully cultivated social circle had reorganized itself around a new center of gravity, leaving him to contemplate the consequences of his actions in increasing isolation. In a quiet corner of the grand ballroom, Lisa and Victoria St. Clair had stepped away from the celebration to discuss concrete plans for their collaboration. Victoria pulled out her tablet, already sketching out timelines and strategies. "I've been watching the industry for years," Victoria explained, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen. "We need fresh perspectives, someone who understands both luxury and accessibility. Your background gives you a unique viewpoint that we desperately need. Lisa absorbed every detail, her years of preparation evident in the questions she asked. I'm particularly interested in implementing sustainable practices without compromising design integrity, she said, pulling out her own notebook. I've been developing techniques to minimize waste and pattern cutting. Meanwhile, Brad attempted to join a group of his usual social circle, approaching with a forced smile and a fresh drink in hand. The conversation stopped abruptly. One by one, the group members made polite excuses and drifted away, leaving him standing alone once again. Brad, someone called out. It was Richard Montgomery, Catherine's husband and a major player in luxury brand investments. Interesting evening you've hosted, though I suspect not quite as you planned. His tone carried a mixture of amusement and disapproval. The few remaining guests who still acknowledged Brad's presence seemed to do so with a new awareness of his character. His reputation for casual cruelty, once dismissed as harmless eccentricity, now appeared in a harsher light. Back in their corner, Lisa's discussion with Victoria had evolved into a broader strategy session. Several other industry figures had joined them, each contributing ideas and connections. Your sustainable luxury concept could revolutionize our approach to fashion weeks, said one prominent buyer. We need to schedule meetings with our sustainability team. Lisa handled each conversation with natural poise, demonstrating a deep understanding of both the creative and business aspects of fashion. I've been studying market trends and sustainability metrics, she explained, sharing detailed observations about consumer behavior and environmental impact. Brad's desperate attempts to reassert his relevance became increasingly transparent and uncomfortable. He tried to interject himself into conversations, only to find them shifting away from him like water around a stone. Mr. Reynolds, one socialite said coldly when he attempted to remind her about an upcoming charity event, I think we'll be reassessing our social calendar. The meaning was clear. His influence was evaporating as quickly as Lisa's was growing. The contrast between them had become stark. While Lisa inspired genuine enthusiasm and respect, Brad's carefully constructed social facade was crumbling. His wealth remained, but the social capital he'd valued above all else was slipping through his fingers. Victoria's team had arrived with contracts and preliminary paperwork. We'll want to move quickly, she told Lisa. The industry is ready for someone like you, someone who understands both the artistry and the human element of fashion. Lisa reviewed the documents with careful attention, her business coursework proving its value. She asked thoughtful questions about terms and conditions, impressing Victoria's legal team with her preparedness. I've dreamed of this moment, Lisa admitted quietly to Victoria, but I never stopped preparing for it. Every class, every late night of studying and designing, they were all for this. Brad, overhearing this exchange, attempted one final time to approach their group. I suppose I deserve some credit for discovering her, he said, trying to laugh. After all, I hired her first. The silence that followed was deaf. Eating. Victoria looked up from the contracts, her gaze arctic. Brad, dear, the only thing you discovered tonight was that karma exists. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're discussing the future of fashion, not its parasites. The evening was winding down, but the energy around Lisa remained electric. Plans were being made, connections forged, opportunities created. She had transformed from an invited curiosity into the epicenter of genuine professional interest. Brad retreated to his study, the sounds of continued celebration following him like an accusation. Through the window, he watched as cars arrived to carry his former guests, now Lisa's future colleagues, into the night, taking with them his carefully constructed social world. As the gala approached its final hours, the mansion's grand halls echoed with the sound of departing guests. Each farewell to Lisa carried the weight of future promises. Lunch meetings, studio visits, collaboration discussions. She had entered the evening as Brad's housekeeper and would leave it as fashion's newest rising star. You've given me hope, whispered a young waitress as she helped collect empty champagne glasses. Lisa squeezed her hand in understanding, remembering countless nights of similar service. Keep studying, she told the girl quietly. Your time will come too. The crowd had thinned considerably, leaving behind an atmosphere charged with the evening's transformative events. Victoria's St. Clair had already left, but not before scheduling a formal meeting for Monday morning. "Be ready to hit the ground running," she'd advised. "The fashion world moves quickly once it finds what it's looking for." Lisa stood in the center of the ballroom, taking a moment to absorb the reality of her situation. The space felt different now. No longer the workplace she'd cleaned countless times, but the setting of her unexpected debut into the fashion world. Brad emerged from his study, his earlier bravado replaced by something closer to desperation. The alcohol he'd consumed throughout the evening had left him unsteady, both physically and emotionally. "You think you've won, don't you?" he called out, his voice echoing in the nearly empty room. Lisa turned to face him, her expression composed. The few remaining guests paused to watch, sensing the importance of this final confrontation. "This isn't about winning, Mr. Reynolds," Lisa responded, her voice steady. "It's about recognizing that every person deserves the chance to pursue their dreams, regardless of where they start." She stepped closer, maintaining eye contact. "You invited me here tonight thinking you would teach me my place in society. Instead, you learned something about your own." Brad's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I gave you a job when nobody else would. I put a roof over your head." "No, Mr. Reynolds," Lisa corrected him gently. "You paid me a salary for services rendered. I earned everything I received, including the time to pursue my education and develop my skills. Your attempt to humiliate me tonight only provided the opportunity I've spent years preparing for." The remaining guests had grown silent, witnessing this final exchange. Among them, Margaret Whitman watched with quiet satisfaction as her former protege stood her ground. "The truly wealthy," Lisa continued, "are those who enrich the lives of others. Tonight showed me that real success isn't about how many people you can look down upon. It's about how many you can lift up alongside you." Brad opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The truth of her statement hung in the air between them, undeniable and damning. "I'll have my resignation letter on your desk tomorrow morning," Lisa said, gathering her portfolio. "Though I suspect you already knew this would be my last evening in your employment." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at him one final time. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, for teaching me an important lesson. Our circumstances don't define us. Our responses to them do. You tried to show everyone that I didn't belong in your world. Instead, you proved that perhaps you never truly belonged in it yourself." The few watching guests murmured in approval. Brad stood alone in the center of his massive ballroom, the space suddenly seeming too large, too empty. The evening had stripped away his carefully maintained facade, revealing the hollow core beneath. Lisa walked toward the exit, her head held high. The same door she'd entered through countless times as a housekeeper would now serve as her passage to a new life. Each step carried her further from her past and closer to the future she'd worked so hard to create. Outside, the city lights sparkled with promise. A car Victoria had arranged waited to take her home, not to her small apartment in Queens, but to her first night as a recognized fashion designer with a future full of possibilities. The following morning, the fashion world was already buzzing with news of the previous night's events. Fashion blogs and social media accounts had picked up the story of the housekeeper-turned-designer who had captivated Victoria's St. Clair's attention. Brad discovered this while scrolling through his phone, each notification feeling like another nail in the coffin of his social standing. In his home office, Brad paced frantically, phone pressed to his ear. "Listen, Stephen," he spoke to his PR manager, "there must be something we can do. Can't we spin this somehow? Make it look like this was my plan all along, discovering new talent or something?" The response from the other end was clear. It was too late. Several guests had already shared their versions of the evening's events, including Brad's attempted humiliation of Lisa. The narrative was set, and it wasn't in his favor. "I don't care what it costs," Brad snapped, desperation creeping into his voice. "Just fix this." He slammed the phone down, only to have it immediately buzz with a notification. Someone had posted a video of his final confrontation with Lisa, her dignified response making him appear even more petty and cruel. Meanwhile, across town, Lisa was being welcomed into Victoria's St. Clair's studio. A young woman stepped forward from the group of employees gathered there. "Miss Carter," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I was one of the servers at last night's gala. What you did, it meant everything to those of us who dream of being more than what others see us as." Victoria, watching this exchange, nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why we need you, Lisa. Fashion isn't just about clothes, it's about transformation, about seeing possibilities where others see limitations." Back at his mansion, Brad made one last desperate attempt to salvage his reputation. He called a meeting with his closest remaining social allies, but the response was tepid. One by one, they made excuses not to come. "Brad," said James, his oldest friend, over the phone, "you've gone too far this time. What you did, it wasn't just cruel, it was stupid. You've exposed something about yourself that people can't unsee." The rejection stung, but what hurt more was the truth behind it. Brad's attempt to humiliate Lisa had revealed more about his own character than hers. His phone buzzed again. Another social event cancellation, this time from a charity board he'd sat on for years. At the studio, Lisa was already deep in work mode. Her portfolio spread across a conference table as she discussed her sustainable fashion concepts with Victoria's team. "We can reduce waste by utilizing these innovative pattern cutting techniques," she explained, her confidence growing with each passing moment. "Brad Reynolds just called," Victoria's assistant announced, entering the room. "He's demanding to speak with you, Victoria." Victoria didn't even look up from Lisa's designs. "Tell him I'm busy discovering the future of fashion. He can read about it in Vogue. You along with everyone else." The message was clear. Brad's influence in the fashion world was evaporating. His name, once a guaranteed entry into any social circle, now carried the taint of his revealed character. In a final, desperate move, Brad tried to approach one of the fashion journalists who had attended the gala. "I could give you an exclusive," he offered. "The real story behind Lisa Carter's discovery." The journalist's response was cutting. "The real story, Mr. Reynolds, is already out there. You tried to humiliate a talented woman and instead revealed your own lack of character. That's not the kind of story you want us to focus on, believe me." As the day progressed, the contrast between Brad's falling star and Lisa's rising one became even more stark. While he frantically tried to maintain his crumbling social position, Lisa was already being photographed for upcoming fashion features, her story resonating with audiences across social media. "Sometimes," Victoria observed, watching Lisa work with her team, "the universe has a way of putting people exactly where they belong, both those who rise and those who fall." The week following the gala transformed Lisa's life completely. Her small apartment in Queens became a hub of activity, with courier services delivering contracts, design materials, and invitations to industry events. Each delivery served as a tangible reminder of her new reality. "We need to move quickly," Victoria explained during their morning meeting. "Fashion Week is in 3 months, and we want to maximize the momentum from your debut." She spread out a timeline across her desk, each milestone carefully plotted. "Your story has captured people's attention, but it's your talent that will keep it." Lisa threw herself into the work with characteristic dedication. Her years of studying fashion while managing a household had taught her exceptional time management skills. "I've been preparing for this moment my whole life," she told Victoria's team. Every spare minute was spent designing, learning, planning. Meanwhile, in his increasingly empty mansion, Brad sat in his dark study, surrounded by social media posts and news articles about Lisa's rise. His initial shock had hardened into something darker. He began making calls to old business contacts, seeking any information that might give him leverage over Victoria's St Clair's empire. "Find me something," he instructed his private investigator. "Everyone has secrets. Victoria, her company, even Lisa. There must be something we can use." His voice carried an edge of desperation masked as determination. A young intern at Victoria's studio approached Lisa during a design session. "Miss Carter, there's something you should know," she said nervously. "Mr. Reynolds has been calling around, asking questions about your background, about Victoria's business practices." Victoria, overhearing this, immediately stepped in. "Lisa, we need to talk." She led her to a private office, her expression serious. "Brad Reynolds is a wounded animal right now, and that makes him dangerous. He's trying to dig up dirt on both of us. Lisa nodded, unsurprised. I spent 5 years managing his household. I know how he operates when he feels threatened. She pulled out her phone, showing Victoria a series of increasingly aggressive text messages from Brad, each one thinly veiling threats about exposing the truth. He's looking into your night school records, Victoria continued, trying to verify your credentials, hoping to find discrepancies. He's even approached some of our suppliers, suggesting they might want to reconsider their contracts with us. Lisa remained calm, her experience dealing with Brad's temperament proving valuable. Everything in my portfolio, every credential I claimed, it's all documented. I knew someday I'd need to prove myself, so I kept meticulous records. Victoria's legal team was already moving to protect both Lisa and the Compa. New York. We've received reports that Mr. Reynolds is attempting to interfere with our Fashion Week preparations, one lawyer explained. He's trying to pressure venues and suppliers to back out. The fashion community's response to Brad's attempts at sabotage was swift and unified. Industry leaders who had witnessed his behavior at the gala closed ranks around Lisa. Suppliers reaffirmed their commitments, some even offering better terms to show their support. My whole life, I've watched people like Brad try to maintain their power by making others feel small, Lisa said during a team meeting. But real power comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Brad's investigation efforts grew more frantic as each attempt at finding leverage failed. His own reputation continued to suffer as word of his vindictive behavior spread through social circles. The very people he'd once influenced now viewed him as a cautionary tale. Mr. Reynolds, his PR manager, finally said, "Every move you make against Lisa only strengthens her position and weakens yours. The narrative is set. You're the villain in this story, and she's the hero." Victoria took steps to protect their upcoming collection, implementing extra security measures around their designs and communications. Brad's desperate, she warned her team, and desperate people can be unpredictable. Lisa spent her evenings working on her designs, each sketch and pattern a step further from her past life. The sound of her sewing machine, once a secret hobby in a tiny apartment, now represented her future in the fashion industry. Keep records of every interaction with Brad, Victoria advised. Every call, every message. His attempt to destroy you might just be the final nail in his social coffin. The day of Lisa's debut fashion show arrived with electric anticipation. The venue, a converted industrial space in Manhattan's fashion district, buzzed with activity. Behind the scenes, models were being fitted in Lisa's sustainable luxury designs while photographers captured every moment of the preparation. Brad Reynolds stood outside the venue, his appearance notably disheveled compared to his usual polished look. He clutched a manila envelope, his last desperate attempt at sabotage. "I need to speak to the press," he insisted, trying to push past security. "I have proof that Lisa Carter is a fraud." The security team, already briefed about potential disruptions, held him back. Inside, whispers of Brad's presence reached Victoria, who immediately implemented their contingency plan. "Keep him out," she instructed, "but record everything. His behavior tonight will be his own undoing." Lisa remained focused on her collection, making final adjustments to a spectacular evening gown crafted from recycled materials. "Each piece tells a story," she explained to the gathering journalists, "about transformation, about seeing beauty and possibility in what others discard." Brad's voice grew louder outside, attracting attention from arriving guests. "She was just a housekeeper," he shouted, waving his envelope. "She cleaned my toilets. This whole thing is a publicity stunt." A prominent fashion critic stepped forward from the crowd. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds, she was a housekeeper. A housekeeper who studied design at night, who practiced her craft while managing your household, who demonstrated more grace under your cruelty than you've shown in your entire privileged life." Inside, the show was about to begin. Lisa's collection, titled Rising, represented her journey from service to success. Each piece incorporated elements of transformation. Uniforms reimagined as haute couture, cleaning cloths transformed into elegant textiles, all elevated through her innovative sustainable techniques. Brad finally managed to force his way into the venue, just as Lisa stepped out to introduce her collection. The room fell silent, cameras turning to capture the moment. "You're all being fooled," he read, his voice echoing through the space. "I have evidence." "The only evidence you have, Mr. Reynolds," Lisa interrupted calmly, her voice carrying throughout the room, "is of your own prejudice. Yes, I was your housekeeper. I'm proud of that work, just as I'm proud of every step that brought me here." Victoria stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Brad's security has called the police. But before they arrive, perhaps you'd like to explain these to everyone." She gestured to a large screen where surveillance footage began playing. Videos of Brad attempting to bribe suppliers, making threatening phone calls, trying to blackmail industry figures. The audience watched in shocked silence as Brad's campaign of revenge unfolded on screen. His face paled as he recognized his own voice threatening to destroy careers, offering bribes, demanding dirt on Lisa and Victoria. "Your need to maintain power," Lisa addressed him directly, "has cost you everything you valued. But look around, your actions didn't destroy me. They revealed who we both truly are." Security finally reached Brad, but the damage to his reputation was complete. As they escorted him out, the audience erupted in applause, not just for Lisa's imminent collection, but for the poetic justice they had witnessed. The fashion show proceeded as planned, each piece receiving enthusiastic response. Lisa's design spoke to both luxury and accessibility, challenging industry norms while respecting classical elements. The sustainable aspects of her collection drew particular praise, with several major retailers immediately expressing interest. As the final model walked the runway in Lisa's masterpiece, a stunning gown made entirely from reclaimed materials, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Fashion critics were already typing on their phones, headlines declaring the birth of a new era in sustainable luxury fashion. Victoria joined Lisa for the final bow, both women emotional but composed. "This isn't just a collection," Victoria announced to the crowd. "This is a revolution in how we think about fashion, about opportunity, about human potential." Outside, Brad watched through the windows as his former housekeeper received accolades from the very society he'd tried to deny her access to. His envelope of evidence lay forgotten on the ground, its contents nothing more than a testament to his own prejudice. The evening ended with Lisa surrounded by well-wishers, buyers, and press. Her collection had not just succeeded, it had transcended expectations, proving that talent and determination could indeed overcome social barriers. Sometimes, Lisa told a young reporter in her final interview of the night, "The people who try to break you end up being the ones who make you unstoppable."